reading, book reading, chapter 1. There you go. There we go. Right, boys. I think, anyway, we're ready. This looks good. This is looking nice, mate. Alright? This is looking absolutely nice. I'm excited for this. Right, here we go. Francis of the Filth, my dudes. Haven't opened it yet. This is going to be the first chapter of the first page of the first chapter. Francis of the Filth by George Miller. The absolute mad lad that is Filthy Frank. So let's go. Let's get into the first ever reading stream. A long time ago, in a dimension far, far away, there was a collective of midgets fighting over a hummus snack who have nothing at all to do with our story, which really begins in a small and very unhygienic bathroom in what humans call New York. It was a first appearance, a common habit. Last 2 days, ramen floating on a carpet of used tissues, unwashed socks, chewing gum clogged, USB sticks, and bottles of urine stacked up in a pyramid. Poorly written Japanese calligraphy, scrolls hanging on the walls between cracked mirrors, and old, proudly displayed high school detention slips. The semen stains on the ceiling. Very nice. Very nice. I've been waiting so long for this moment. Hell yeah, dude. Yet, on closer inspection, there was, at the same time, something unique about this habitat as well. Grotesque to the point of disfigurement, and disconcerting to the point of alarm. There lay in the middle of it all, rather happily, blending in as though one with it. Francis of the Filth. He was covered in nothing but phlegm and a pair of SpongeBob underpants, which could stand on their own and would most certainly shatter like glass if thrown at a hard surface. Though dead to the world, he would occasionally whimper, utterances which were a window into the mind of filth that beheld his name and title. No, Jules Santana, please don't touch me there. Female comedians are very funny. Must eat more hummus. The other kids won't let me play in the park. It's my turn to ride the chocolate man. The school bus is responsible for their deaths, not me. Yes, it was I who left the steamy surprise. My stepdad was veiny individual. Need more rats. Damn. This guy's Francis of the Filth really is quite an individual, isn't he? Curiously, and without warning, a second voice could be heard whispering through the Dorsain scented air of the room. Ochinchin desu Orochinchin? Orochinchin desu? For a moment, the words just floated in the air like they were struggling to cut through the stench. They were repeated. Orochinchin desu? This time, they reached This time they reached the ears of our protagonist, yet they remained muffled till he indistinctively picked at his ear and pulled out a long wax the size of a date. A third calling brought the desired effect, and Frank sat bolt upright, with that terrified look that only comes from hearing Christian rap played in the morning and seeing the Dark Lord himself. Yet nothing is worse than Christian rap and seeing the Dark Lord himself, you know? Orochinchin desu? Part of the ceiling then opened up like a wet pouch, pulsing and pushing out what looked like, for lack of a better description, a black fetus. Still screaming, it slid into the ground and began to unfold. Dressed completely in black, it was as though his very source was of darkness itself. His presence seemed to bring a distortion of the space-time continuum, and when he spoke it, brought both shadows and chills. He prowled slowly before Frank on all fours like a frog with chronic arthritis. His tongue occasionally darted in and out, almost in rhythm to the Tourette's like flinching of his tightly wrapped black head. Everything about him incites dread. His darkness, his movements, his uncut fingers and toenails. But most of all it was his eyes, weird and freaky to the core. They were simultaneously present and ethereal, penetrating and all-knowing, and yet they stared out from their sockets with spastic abandon. "Chin Chin, Dark Lord, why have you come to torment me? Have you come to see me in the abyss?" Frank asked, paralyzed with fear. Now Frank lived across a back street from a morbidly obese lady called Mrs. Montez, who pretended to be a widowed pole dancer, but was really a PETA agent, determined to catch Frank in the act of animal abuse. She was, however, actually widowed. That part is true. She had also had a miscarriage. She observed Frank through a homogeneous telescope, which was really quite unnecessary because the back street was only 5 feet wide and their windows directly faced each other. She would sit for hours watching Frank lie comatose from huffing jenkem, just as he would sit for hours keeping a protective eye on that 10-year-old boy with a nice little ass living across the street in front of his apartment. She befriended Frank by telling him she was simply checking on his fiber intake and occasionally throwing fruit through his window, whether it was open at the time or not. When she saw the horrors of Chin Chin unfolding in Frank's room, she threw open her window and cried out for mercy. "Leave him alone! He's just a boy!" Within moments, other neighbors with similarly large telescopes were throwing their windows open and hurling their emotive plea towards the Dark Lord. And as soon as the whole back alley echoed with the words, "He's just a boy! He's just a boy!" much like any Italian neighborhood. "Alright, Chin Chin," the Dark Lord continued with his demands. "But I have made the sacrifices you asked for," Frank said. "The blood and pubic hair and nail clippings of thousands of youths were all duly provided with voice evidence. I can show you right now." Shit, dude. Shit's getting intense. The first two pages, dude, just straight away just gets intense as fuck. Yes. He pulled himself fully out and immediately began to caress his nipples. He was now completely back to his normal self. All his lacerations had healed and his nipples were back to full erection. Whatever wretched wounding had previously disturbed him, he was back to his normal, cheerful self again. "Yes," he cried, and immediately inserted a recorder into his left nostril, and broke into a rousing rendition of a tune from his glory days. Before Alpha Centurion could start dancing to the music, or Frank could compliment him on his plays or his general good looks and sick moves, the door was kicked wide open, and in a stroll of strange Japanese man wearing a brown spectacles and a Hawaiian shirt and a safari hat. "Wow," he declared. "Wow, Franco!" "Safari man," Frank cried, ecstatic that his whole posse was reunited once again. "I thought you were still back in..." No, let's not go there. Suffice to say, being married to a neggy was never going to work out for someone like me. Ha 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 ha. She had no pussy. Can you imagine aggressively trying to make a dent in the drywall with your dick? Not for me. He was shadowed by Drone, who hovered above his left shoulder. Frank gestured for all of them to come together. They embraced in a tight and passionate group hug, with Alpha Centurion burrowing with pleasure into Pink Eye's thighs. With the 6 of them now together, the circus was pretty much complete again. There was much rejoiced until late in the night, with laughing and dancing and general scat. General scat, people. Laughing and dancing and some general scat, of course. But Frank's dilemma remained, and his interest was piqued. He was still capable of multiplying his chromosomes, and he was still greatly troubled by this. Not merely the capability, but the reasoning behind it. Why would any god want to see the multiplications of his own chromosomes and no one else? Why has Frank, and Chin Chin, and all the powerful gods chosen him? Why was Frank so verbally and sexually aggressive all the time? He was no closer to finding out why. There had been more, beyond the Peace Lords. There had to be an ultimate god. Frank was more determined now than ever before to find him, confront him, and demand the answers to his questions. And so his quest became all-consuming. But this is by no means where it had begun. That was chapter 1, my dudes. That was chapter 1. It's a short chapter, I assure you, but chapter 2 is a bit longer. So do you want me to carry on with chapter 2, since chapter 1 was, quite a short chapter? Are you enjoying it? Was it good? I'd like to know. I'm thinking of like every chapter, short chapter, but a nice one at that. I know, right? So yeah, I'm thinking of doing multiple chapters every stream, and like in between the chapters is where like if I get a follow or a sub or a donation, I can like shout them out in between like the in between the chapters and just talk to you for a little bit if you guys have sent any messages during the chapters. Do you want me to carry on? I can carry on. Carry on. Do you want me to go through chapter 2? Or are we good for now? Do you want to just shoot off? What do you want to do? You guys let me know. Is the music a bit too loud? Because I know like it's a bit like gonna be a bit loud too as well. Though. Yeah, sounds like a plan, my man. Only go through chapter 2 if you aren't tired. Yeah, I'm not tired. I'm good. I'll do chapter 2 then. All right, cool. Let's do it then. If you're up for it, I'm down to listen. Good, awesome. I'm glad you're liking it. So you guys are like quite liking it then, you? Is this a nice little thing for you guys? Change the title then to chapter 2. Also, stopping in between chapters gives me a chance to change the title from chapter 1 to chapter 2 as well, so that's also good. I could do that as well. So, there we go. Very relaxing. Good. I'm glad. Are you liking the reading voice? It's good. Yeah, this is great. Fun times. Hell yeah. Do you like my pink guy, Nies? It's a pretty accurate Nies, isn't it? It's pretty accurate, I think. It's going Nies. It's pretty accurate to the real pink guy, you know. I really like this. Why doesn't anyone else do this? I don't know, man. I have no idea. It's pretty good though, isn't it? I mean, VoiceOver Pete did it. I got the inspiration from VoiceOver Pete. I think he did a reading of... I can't remember what he did. VoiceOver Pete did a reading of something, didn't he? But it was for like a YouTube stream thing. Actually, I guess there are audiobooks. There are indeed. So, but nothing like this. Yeah, man. Nobody's ever done like live streams, you know what I mean? Which is cool. I quite like it. I quite like doing it, you know? It's good stuff. Right then. So, moving on to chapter 2, people. Let's do it. Alright. All children except one grow up, and all children except one are born of woman. In the spring of 1945, a fetus-like infant was retrieved from the open-air sewer beneath a public toilet in a slum of the Lorong village of Jakarta. He was named Francisco, meaning freed from filth. And from the first moment of his existence, and in spite of his squalid genesis, he demonstrated an unparalleled genius. At first, there was a moment of crying, then cooing, very shortly followed by clear linguistic utterances. By the time the authorities had arrived, some hours later, he was writing quadratic equations on the wall in his own excrement. Skrillex, congratulations that I did my first community. Oh, hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah, man. I don't want to be reading in between, sorry. And explained them in his own excrement. Excrement on walls was nothing new to the locals. Great. And explaining them in Aramaic to the crowd which had gathered. For the next 2 weeks, he was taken in by a family of 28 running a local temple. They lived over a fetid brown creek with the smell of a pig farm, and there was a fed and clothed and loved. Because of his brilliant mind and progressive knowledge, he was quickly treated as a god in the village, and people would line up to pet his head in hopes of having knowledge imparted to them. He thrived in the grime of his environment, growing rapidly in stature and intellect. As soon as the appearance of a toddler, while engineering sanitation, transport systems, and birth control for the whole community. This way, he was no longer needed to circumcise the women. Wait. Word spread quickly about Francisco, and soon in the Indonesian military, we're on his doorstep. Would be if the temple had a doorstep. Great. There was much wailing and moaning as the young prodigy was ripped from their arms, and a torrent of semi-naked bodies followed along the vehicles as they departed, banging on the window and doors and begging them to return him to him. Their hopes were never realized. They were gunned down, all of them. The Temple family, their neighbors, and all who had come out to protest, their bodies piled as high as horses' shoulders. But as far as the eye could see, slang, calam, clang, a soldier yelled at the families. This was not Indonesia, he had a speech impediment. No, this fucking book, man. Francisco was taken to a top secret facility deep in the mountains where, after a brief period of quarantine, so-called experts, though they had never seen anything of Francisco like before, began to feed his precarious curiosity, intellect, and abilities. They were in awe. They began with little golden books, with tic-tac-toe, but before long were working on James Joyce and global thermonuclear warfare. Apart from the odd foray into hentai and erotic art, Francisco adhered strictly to academic and ethical purposes. Scientists from all over the world began to hear rumors of this prodigy and would try to arrange secretive visits to Francisco's cell. There, the lucky few would marvel over the possibilities he brought into the world. Was he a god? They wondered. In mutation? Should he be encouraged or stopped? Their audience with Francisco was inevitably inspiring and humbling, and was often coupled with an intoxicating agenda. Despite the highly classified nature of the project, to which Francisco was now referred, and the isolated location of its facilities, one day, several months into operations, a blonde-haired man in a very dark suit turned up and announced at the front gate. He flashed some identification that was escorted into the heat of the complex. There, he was introduced to the overseers of the program, looking his Indonesian colleague in the eye with a curious expression that could have been mistaken for contempt. He removed his spectacles and raised his palm. Heil Hitler! Great, thanks, book, thanks. In the summer of that year, the Pacific War was brought to an end, with two cataclysmic explosions. They destroyed everyone and everything for miles around, and left a simmering, scorching layer of radiation to last for the ages. The lucky ones were those right under the detonations, who were immediately reduced to ashes and outlined, etched in concrete. It was those who survived the initial blast who learned the true meaning of suffer. They wandered around aimlessly, hopeless, with melting flesh, groping about in near or total blindness for help. None came, and that which did came too late, and with little or no means of alleviating their agony. The torture was not short-lived. For years, even decades to come, those who had been exposed to the radiation suffered numbness, loss of fingernails, blood spots under the skin, tumors, leukemia, kidney and liver infection, and so on. The list of after effects was almost endless, and for those who suffered from them so was the pain. As a Jew, I like that joke. Great. Thanks, man. Such widespread and severe affliction hastened the surrender of the Japanese forces, and with the capitulation of the other Axis powers earlier in the year, the ceasing of worldwide hostilities was now complete. For the general populace, exhausted and depleted, it couldn't have come soon enough, and with the exception of a couple of skirmishes in Guam and a few other remote areas, peacetime was welcomed by victor and losers nations alike with great relief and vigor. But not by all. Not everyone was pleased with the outcome of the war, or the means by which it had been achieved. There were some who believed that the Axis powers still retained the ability, the manpower, and most of all the technology savvy to inflict revolutionary damage onto the Allied forces, and alter not merely the outcome of the war, but both history and future together. Soncorp was of one such organization, a secretive, privately owned Japanese company based in Okinawa. It was bitterly opposed to the Japanese surrender and continued to work unabated in technological, ideological, and biological warfare. Though the rest of the country labored in poverty, Soncorp remained flush with funds for its operation. A little-known fact regarding the end of the war in the European theatre concerns the demise of the Führer. In that bunker, in Berlin, just before he put the pistol to his temple, Hitler uttered his final words, "Gib alles so Soncorp." You like that that German voice? Was it good? That wasn't racist, right? Which translated to, give everything to Sonocorp. So that's what really happened in history. He gave all of his stuff to Sonocorp, so. As such, the Okinawan company had available to them near unlimited resources from war loot and retained communications with its sister allies in Germany and Italy to pursue its goals of supremacy. Given these objectives, one could hardly overstate the joy and reverberated along with their corridors when they received word from the fatherland that a new resource of immeasurable capacity had been secured. Good German voice needs to be a bit more raspy. Okay, great, thanks. I haven't read this book in a while. I've only read it once, so I didn't know the stuff that was in here. So when I had to just read that straight away, I was like, oh shit, German voice, fuck. Wait, what is it? Wait. New resources of immeasurable capacity had been secured. And so it was that it was Francisco who was removed from Indonesia at a very young age and transported to Okinawa, where he was to spend the remainder of his adolescent years. There his name was shortened to Frank, because the Japanese seemed incapable of pronouncing the Cisco part of his name, and he was put in a lab working towards various means of Axis domination. This enigma of young man grew to about 180 centimeters tall and developed a well-defined body, thanks to chasing monkeys and boars around the lab whenever they escaped, which was often. He would wrestle them to the ground or knock them out, sometimes with the aid of a porcelain sink and a trick he had learned from a Slav. He had a shock of thick black hair, which gave him an aura of tremendous virility. He wore silver-wired rimmed glasses upon a nose that had more than once identified him as having Jewish ancestry. That is quite a nose. An association he vehemently denied. He was in denial about this big Jew nose. That's bad. I have a big Jew nose. I'm not in denial about it. And he always wore the same blue shirt. It had never been washed. Frank's scheduled upbringing gave him a peculiar perspective on the world. He tended to see people and events in extremes. He divided folk into creators and consumers, leaders and followers, thinkers and dumbasses, and bullies and their prey. No one really sat in between any of these paradigms. People were either one or the other, and once they were one, it was virtually impossible to change the other. Frank saw himself as the consummate creator, leader, thinker, bully in almost any environment he found himself in. And then there were his voice. Much had been hypothesized about his raspiness of Frank's voice, and why it came so to be. Some have assumed it to be purely genetically anomaly. Others are certain that it is a result of a bacterial infection caught from any number of animals he was experimenting on. On occasion, Frank told people that it was from swallowing thumbtacks after losing a bet in a drunken stupor. But the truth of the matter is that for a short stint in Frank's formative years, he took to singing Christianity heavy metal. A phase he quickly grew out of, to the relief of everyone in the lab and the local area. Yeah, Christian heavy metal will probably do that to your voice, ain't gonna lie. But the constant shrieking and growling took its toll on poor Frank's virgin vocal cords, and alas, they never fully recovered. Young Frank had interests and ideas that extended way beyond the wall of the lab. He was fascinated with midgets and aliens and black people in Paris. He found unusual dialects from the Congo, Peru, and bowels of Southeast Asia to be of a particular interest. Rap and opera filled his music library, and he developed a particular distaste for non-Japanese who attempted to infiltrate Japanese society. Professing a knowledge of the culture while demonstrating a profound ignorance of it, there were many artisans and thinkers, musicians and poets who inspired him, but none more so than Scroogedinger and some guy named Mozart. I don't know who he is. Who down the line would become the ancestor of Fred Durst. There you go, guys. Bet you didn't know that. Bet you didn't know that Fred Durst's ancestor, the leader of Limp Bizkit, is actually Mozart. Alright, guys, bet you didn't know that. Bet you didn't know that. Biologically speaking, Frank himself was, it turned out, an even more mysterious figure than his filthy origins who would suggest. Though dredged up from an Indonesian sewer, DNA tests revealed that he was primarily of Japanese and German extraction. This explains some of inherent traits in Frank, like his unstable appetite for takoyaki, Japanese food. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that. Sudden bowing and penchant for Raigyo Taiso early in the morning. On the kraut side, Frank would immerse himself in bratwurst diets for weeks on end, but find secret relief in listening to recordings of Umpapa bands of Munich. God, I'm butchering all of these right now, I'm sorry. Finds himself secret relief in listening to recordings of Umpapa bands of Munich, and was without any sense of humor. There were other genetic markers in his DNA that were undefiable, and it was these which started the rumors and fears amongst his colleagues in the labs. Ooh, there's other parts in his DNA that no one knows about. Ooh, I know what they are. Ooh. There was only one man that Frank answered to in the lab, and that was Suba Honda. Honda was a graduate from Tokyo University who excelled in bioengineering. He originally joined the Imperial Army because, neutering the psychopaths within, he wanted to create bioweapons to see what would happen to them. A quietly spoken man, he was once well built, yet now rather rounded. He has approached middle-aged. He almost became a professional baseball player before the war, primarily because smashing things with a bat was marvelous release for someone who was otherwise extremely reserved. Yet he quit baseball at the last minute because he didn't want to give into a dirty American tradition. When the war came to its fireball end, Honda was offered a job at Sonocorp, a position he received with enthusiasm and gratitude, as philosophically it involved continuing service to the Empire, and in practical terms, it involved destroying things. Ooh, he got cooties. Who's Mozart? Yeah, I know, I don't. That completely skipped me, dude. I have no idea who Mozart is. I haven't got a clue who Mozart is. So you might have to Google him, I don't know. He could just be some old SoundCloud rapper or something, I don't know. His relationship to Frank was simple. In awe of Frank's genius and his moral failures, his job was to leave Frank alone to do the work that he had been specifically employed to do, and question neither the Germans nor the Japanese board of Sonocorp about it. In this sense, Honda was the perfect supervisor for Frank. Loyal, yet without ethics. Nationalist, yet without any sense of restraint. And brilliant, without any desire to use it for the greater good. There were 15 other employees in the lab to clean and to perform mundane duties. But to Frank, they were all faceless drudges, as boring as a feminist at a dinner party, about as funny as a fart in a church. There was one presence in that facility who stood out to Frank, and who became very nearly the sole focus of his attention. His name was Ichiro. Ichiro mattered. Not in the sense that he was important or intelligent or helpful. On the contrary, Ichiro was a useless idiot. He was the very antithesis of Frank. The consuming dumbass follower type who was the prey for Frank's inner bully. He was the necessary evil in Frank's small world, and Frank worked him without any mind or mercy. Goddamn. Frank is a fucking maverick, dude. A little contemptuous man with a basketball head out of round glasses. He looked like some kind of bootleg Japanese Harry Potter doll you would win a second-rate carnival. He had "Kick Me" written all over his fat, poxy body. Simply put, he looked like a fucking retard. Thanks. Great. There's some top-level stellar writing there. Thanks, George Miller. Ichiro was Frank's whipping boy, his dog, his right-hand whipper. In almost every sense of the word, Ichiro was Frank's bitch. This explains why Frank never referred to him by his name his mother gave him, but at his sorry birth, but called him, without exception, Bitchero. Got him. Whenever Frank needed someone to mop up spillage, he called for Bitchero. Whenever Frank wanted someone to pick up the pieces of a rat, he would bellow for Richero. He would bellow for Bitchero. If he needed a bottle to piss in, Bitchero would hold it at the ready. Bitchero! Wait, fuck no. Bitchero, hand me the generator. Bitchero, pick up the spleen. Bitchero, stick that knife in the toaster. With every command, Bitchero would bow and scrape and respond with, "My name Bitchero." And whenever... Fucking, this book is gonna kill me, dude. Why did I pick this as my first book, dude? Whenever Frank defecated, he would watch as his turd was flushed away and say, "Goodbye, Bitchero." Can't, my voice is like so fucked. I'm trying to do the Frank voice and it's just like, it's not working, dude. The laboratory itself was like no other. A perfectly square grey building. It looked like a rundown Japanese public school. There was nothing in its design to please or inspire, save for a few palm trees which grew on the boundaries of the property. Rising up behind it was a mountain range covered with Jurassic vegetation and still unclassified fauna. It teemed with monkeys, boar and habu snakes, yet most of its natural resources remained undiscovered. I think online killed your voice. I think it did, dude. God. The building contained 3 floors, with the top floor at treetop height. Vines and other vegetation ran along the outside wall of the lab, weaving in and out of the window and ventilation systems, which no longer worked. The sultry air was a perfect incubator for all of this foliage, and it was a common source of fatigue amongst the employees on any given afternoon. The top floor was all Frank's, and he was given unfettered access to complete his tasks. It contained line after line of computers and various other equipment, most of which no one other than Frank knew how to operate. But Frank, with an intellect that is itself was fast approaching singularity, ran them all with ease and with distinction. The preferred fields of research were diverse, including in bacteriology, horology, pharmacology, biochemistry, cosmology, endocrinology, spectroscopy, hematology, mycology, and of course, galatology. I have no idea how to say any of these. This is a bit ridiculous. But if there were any pet area of research and design that meant more to Frank than any other, it was radiobiology. That is, the study of the action of ionizing radiation on living things. Of course, everybody knew that. As such, the lab was strewn with cages containing, or which contained, animals of all sizes and kinds. Primates, bird, reptiles, amphibians, insects were all loved equally for their willingness to serve a greater good. Presently, a small newt sat gingerly in the corner of a clear container, occasionally looking up at Frank, at its god, and scratching its chest. Then there were the rats. Frank hated rats with a passion, and found a great pleasure in reserving his most terrifying experiments for them. Most terrifying experiments for them. Some moved about in their confinement with no unconcern, while others were no longer able to, and some were no more than organs or appendages on a table. On more than one occasion, Frank would tie a rat to 3 or 4 pigeons, then release them to the skies. The pigeons would fly off in different directions, tugging the rat back and forth in midair. The rat would be writhing and screaming. The birds would be scared to death of the noise and the rat was making, and fly even harder, which made the rat's scream reach fever pitch. And so the circus would go on, till it came to its grisly demise. Frank would just shrug and chuckle. That is some gnarly shit, dude. That is gnarly as fuck, dude. Could you imagine that? God damn, dude. These episodes marked a beginning. Indeed, the socially repressive lab life began to take a toll on Frank. He would drink copious amount of beer, and then abuse the animals in the lab for what he claimed was a node. He would disappear for hours on end in the evenings to go to dog fights, cockfights, bullfights, and midget boxing. He would drunkenly harass the hookers in the red light district, yelling, "I got Molly, I got White," and "Gang gang, free my nigga was up," while being dragged away by the police and or off base. Yeah, man. Go free his boy Goo up, man. In short, while Frank was a genius and a biological phenomenon, his environment was making him filthy. Yet, the greater change was from within. Frank had been pouring his heart and soul into radiobiology, and all the while, unwittingly, he poured radiobiology into his genetic vulnerabilities. The interaction of radiation on the unknown genetic markers in Frank's DNA brought about changes which Frank could have never imagined. Dark changes, menacing changes, changes that reached far further than Frank could have ever imagined. At first it was just aches and pains, but then his urine turned orange and he began to have hallucinations, sometimes happy, sometimes terrible. Always weird. Aware of these changes, Frank decided to secretly test himself, certain that he now had some form of cancers. It was not without fear then that he laid the syringe on the table, sterilized his arm with a swab of alcohol, and slapped his skin to bring up the veins. On finding the best one, he slipped the needle in and watched the red essence fill the test tube. He filled a second, just in case. Before the blood on his arm had dried, he had the sample mixed with testing solutions and placed under a microscope. There, to his horror, he watched the nuclei acids behave in a way that he had never seen before. They were wriggling, writhing, and then pulling apart as its self-rejection, before completely splitting down the middle, a process which appeared to be repeating ad infinitum. I didn't even know if infinitum was a word, but that's cool. This discovery made cancer look like the common cold. With cancer, the cells multiply uncontrollably. With Frank, his chromosomes were now multiplying uncontrollably. He was, in effect, becoming an entirely new species. He continued to look into the eyepiece, wondering, hoping, that this was another hallucination. He called his little rodent friend over to confirm the findings. "Pichero, get over here!" He was in front of Frank immediately. "Look into this microscope and tell me what you see." "My name Pichero." "Well, what do you see? Don't hold back, tell me everything." The simpleton began to sweat and look decidedly nervous. "My name Pichero." It's so fucking dumb. "So you see it too?" Frank said. "You see the chromosomes multiplying?" Pichero could no longer control his bladder. "My name Pichero, my name Pichero." Frank turned away in distress for a moment, then looked back to his underlying and held out for a stern finger. "No one hears about this, Pichero. You got that? No one is to know." "My name Pichero." "Now what are you still doing here? Piss off." The weasel scampered off with one last, "My name Pichero." Frank diligently took samplings every morning and every evening and kept daily notes on the progress of his condition. What he failed to do, however, primarily because he just didn't care, was test Pichero, who had also been regularly exposed to the uranium. "Pichero, bring me that sea cucumber," he calls to his one fine morning. "My name Pichero." Frank looked at his little dolts, and he held the dripping echinoderm in his trembling hands. Pichero looked different this morning. He had an aura of great patheticness, greater nervousness, as though he was expecting to be beaten, far greater than he'd ever been beaten before. Frank enjoyed this enormously. Enormously? I can't speak tonight. Frank enjoyed this enormously. My God. Carrying on. "My name What?" said Frank. "Spit it out, boy." "My name What in the name of the sky is wrong with you?" "My name," and before he could get any more out, his head jerked back in such a violent manner, the crack in his neck could be heard down the second floor, with a sound like a branch of a tree breaking. his jaw and mouth ripped apart with such incredible force that the crown of his head began to split open. There were momentary resistance before Bichero's entire body, from his head down to the base of his torso, ripped into two, and a new naked and slimy Bichero emerged, slithering out of what was now a crumpled carcass lying on the floor. Frank said. Cool. He then turned to continue on his own testing. Wow, that's brutal. My name Bichero, said this new Bichero, identical to the previous one though, still covered in thick slime. Yeah, I know, said Frank. Now piss off. His metamorphosis was not a singular event. In fact, Bichero fast fell into a natural routine of excruciating death and slimy rebirth. Once a week or so, and Frank, more amused than concerned in any way at all, would take fastidious notes each time it happened. His concern remained more for himself. He knew that he and Bichero were changing. The only difference was, no one cared about Bichero. And as soon as Bichero had completed a metamorphosis, Frank would tell him to hurry and clean up the mess he had made on the floor and to incinerate the putrid carcass that he always left behind. Shit's getting real, boys. Shit's getting real. And guess what? That was the end of chapter 2. Boom. Slamming through these chapters, my dudes. We are slamming through these chapters. Was that good? How was that chapter for you guys? Did you like it? Oh, you're still here. Goddamn. You guys are just chilling. Hell yeah. Good 2 chapters. I know, right? I told you, like, the actual... I don't know if you guys are following very well. I don't know how well my story reading is. But I hope you've been following. And you've been kind of getting a grasp of what's happened so far. And you enjoying it? You enjoying it? Chilling. Hell yeah, man. I'm glad. But yeah. Yeah, I hope you guys have been, you know, following along and not just kind of just letting it go past your head, you know what I mean? I hope you guys are, you know, actually following along with this story. It's a good one at that. Hoping I've done this a bit justice, you know. Hoping that my reading voice is good, you know. Yeah, so I think I'm just going to leave it there then, peeps. That was 2 chapters of Francis of the Filth. So he found out that the uranium that was put in his body is multiplying his chromosomes loads, but it's not affecting him as the way as Bichero did. Bichero is now just keeps dying and respawning, you know. Frank is Gucci though. Frank's Gucci. That's not happening to him yet. It's doing other things to him, but we don't know yet. We don't know what's happening yet. Oh, it's in chapter 3, boys. I don't know whether or not I should get the book. Seems like a good one. Yeah, see what I mean? Like genuine. Like, it's actually a genuinely well-written book. And it's got loads of really good comedy bits in them. And, like, the comedy in this is, like, really well done as well. It's always like a small little, like, joke here and there, like, in between all, like, the really good storytelling parts. So, like, it kind of catches you off and you're like, oh, God, that's funny. But, like, it also doesn't take away from the story, which is what I really enjoy about it. Like, the comedy isn't, like, incredibly obnoxious where, like, it takes away from the story or, like, just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And you know what I mean? Like, the comedy isn't forced. It is something that you'd go, you know what? Yeah, Frank would actually probably do that. Like, the filthy Frank would do that in that situation, you know? So, this is like Family Guy in book form and slightly less obvious. Oh, don't you dare say that. How dare you? Filthy Frank will always be way funnier than Family Guy ever will. I'd say this is more of like a South Park, you know? Because South Park do this kind of stuff as well, you know? But yeah. I mean, you could definitely pick it up, man. It's on Amazon. You can just pick this up with Amazon. You know what I mean? It's good, man. Oh yeah, like, just couldn't think of anything else. Oh, okay. Yeah, man, it's good stuff. So this is my way of commemorating our boy, Franco. I know he's gone and he'll never come back, but this is gonna be my little tribute to him. You know. But there you go.